Okay, now we will be discussing the aging schedule. Aging schedule or debtors analysis. So exactly what we mean by the aging is basically, if we see the definition of aging schedule, aging, that the customers needs to pay back in different time periods. Let's suppose some have to pay within 1 month, and some may pay within 2 months or 6 months or even after 9 months. So the collectively the amount will fall differently in these categories, these brackets. This is basically known as the aging of the customers. Means, let's suppose if Mr. there are 3 or 4 customers, A, B, X, P, and Q. A's amount is falling due by 2 months of $1,000. B amount is falling due in 1 month $1,000, and again after 9 months you have to pay $20,000. He may have purchased different things. X may have to pay after 6 months of $10,000. P may have to pay $500 here, $500 here, $200 here, and $5,000 here. And Q have to make one payment of $6,009. So this is known as the aging, that according to the time limit of the uh, time credit period of the customers, they need to pay. Now, obviously, the customers are not our relative or our friend. Even friend can also back out from the payment. So there is a trend, or you may say there is a requirement of accounting standards, that every company needs to make a provision for its accounts receivable on the basis of this aging schedule. Now, you tell me, if the time period is greater, the default risk is greater or will be lesser?
Greater.
It would be greater. So the greater the default risk, so the provision for the bad debts would be, the percentage for the bad debt would be greater or lesser?
Greater.
Greater. So if, let's suppose I say that this company, whatever the company is, has the policy of making 2% of provision for all of its accounts receivable that are due in 1 month, and company has a policy of 3.5, making 3.5% provision of all of its accounts receivable that are the due date in the coming 2 months. Because the greater the time period, the greater the risk of default. So the greater the provision for the bad debts will be. For the 6 months time period, company has a policy of 5% of all of its accounts receivable. And for 9 months, the company's policy is for 7%, and maybe because accounts receivable are the short term and needs to be collected in 1 year at least. So the next would be 12 months, and it may be 10% or 15%. We are not discussing this. So this is the policy of the company, policy for provision of bad debts. Done. Now, what would be the amount of the allowance for bad debts? For this, we have to calculate first total accounts receivable amount. In 1 month, it would be 1,500. In the second month due, it would be again 1,500. Then it would be 10,200, and there would be 31,000. Done. Now, what would be the amount or provision for bad debts? It would be this multiplied by this percentage, this multiplied by this percentage, this multiplied by this percentage, and this multiplied by this percentage. So this will be provision for or allowance for bad debts. Can you calculate it? Let me know the amount.
The first one is 30.
30.
Yes.
Okay. Second,
The second one is 52.5.
round of 53.
Yes. And the third one is 510.
Sorry,
510.
510. And
2170.
sorry,
2170.
2170.
Yes.
Done. And now what is the total of all these aging analysis?
2763.
2763. Now see, in the last example, we had made the allowance for bad debts of 10,000 by simply calculating the percentage, and this would be the allowance or provision for bad debts. But here, the company will say that our total allowance for bad debts is 2763. But how this amount has been calculated? It is calculated through what? The aging analysis, debtor analysis, aging schedule. So for the aging schedule, first we have to break down the collectibles into these credit periods. Then afterwards, we have to see the what is the policy for the specific credit period of the company. Then we have to calculate that credit period provision. Then we have to sum it up to arrive at the total amount of allowance for bad debts. So now the entry would be bad debts expense debit 2763, and allowance for bad debts would be credit 2760, and this would be the final entry. Understand this concept of aging?
Yes.
Okay, now let's discuss some small concepts again for the bad debts. Example. Let's suppose we have given balances. The following balances are extracted. That is, accounts receivables are amounted to $150,000, and account receivable balance will always be debit initially, and allowance for bad debts balance amounts to $52,500. Done. These are the balances, and this will be the credit balance, obviously. Now we will discuss some scenarios separately. Now scenario one. 10% of accounts receivable proved uncollectible, and 10% of accounts receivable was estimated to be bad. Done.
Yes.
B scenario. Company wants, these are separate scenarios, okay? Company wants to further increase provision by dollar 1,250. C. Company wants provision for bad debts. Provision means allowance, okay? Company wants provision for bad debts to be maintained at level of dollar 50,000. Now these are the scenarios. What is the requirement? Required in every scenario, pass necessary journal entries. This is the one scenario or one requirement for every scenario. Number two, calculate revised balances of accounts receivable and allowance for bad debts. Number three, bad debts expense amount. So this is the question. Can you do this?